come down with it. They're going to have to heat it here, and that shot will not count, or will it? It will count.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenour and Sean Meyers.
We welcome you into another episode of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast here on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel. I am Sean Meyers, joined by Jack Ridenour. And Jack, we got a lot to get to on this show. Of course, we're going to have our Plays of the Week segment. We're going to have our Team of the Week. It's the Yough Cougars boys basketball team who is riding high. We'll have another trivia question and a look ahead at the final week of the regular season for boys and girls in terms of section play. But let's begin with our starting five, our big takeaways. We talk about Penn Trafford and the boys team right off the bat. They had an incredible week this past week, an upset over Gateway. They knocked off McKeesport at home later in the week to get right back in the thick of the section race and certainly in the playoff discussion as well. Penn Trafford boys seems like making their move at the right time.
Yeah, they're starting to heat up at a perfect time of the year. And I think that especially with those two wins against Gateway and McKeesport, those snapped a 4-game losing streak that they were on. And I think the last thing that they want to have is a 6-game losing streak going into games against Latrobe and Kiski area, who, let's not forget, Kiski area and Latrobe, they're all jumbled up right there with Penn Trafford in the section standing. So Penn Trafford's job is not finished. I think, again, they've done a great job putting themselves into this position. But this game coming up against Latrobe is going to be key. And then their final game of the year against Kiski area, this is a Kiski area team that beat Penn Trafford earlier in the year. So this is a huge game coming up for Penn Trafford. If they get things done and handled against Latrobe, I think then that margin of error starts to become a little bit more manageable against Kiski area. But they've done a great job putting themselves in that position. And again, Sean, we love talking about this section. Penn Trafford beating Gateway. I mean, we've had all these different scenarios play out. And really, I don't think anyone's safe, including Franklin Regional, in that section.
And really, it goes back to the win at Gateway, because you mentioned a 4-game losing streak. The game prior, I had the broadcast of it. It was a heartbreaker. They lost in overtime at Franklin Regional. They could have really put the section on notice had they knocked off the Panthers. They didn't. And you know, Jack, that could go one of two ways. Either that could be kind of the nail in the coffin on the season if the team can't rebound, or it gives them an opportunity to come back from adversity and show that they're better for it. They did the latter because they went and knocked off Gateway, and the Gators have kind of lost a little bit of their momentum. But the most important thing I thought was you had to follow it up, because if you lose to last place McKeesport, you kind of give it all right back. And they were down for almost the entirety of that first half, but a really good second half. The curious thing about this team for Coach Kelly is he's got one kind of go-to option in Tyler Freeze, and then it's about 6, 7, maybe even 8 different guys that are all sort of equal in terms of what they provide. And I think that makes them, in some ways, even more challenging to kind of scout and prepare for.
Well, it's in particular because somebody could go off that is not on the scouting report. We see that happen all the time, where a player that maybe is not seen as a shooter or maybe not seen as a driver start to exploit the opposing defense in that manner, whether it's shooting or driving, because that they're not being game planned for. So to your point, I think that that's something that Penn Trafford can utilize. Yeah, having maybe just one go-to guy, but then having 6 or 7 other players that can morph themselves into potentially a go-to player on any night. Then all of a sudden it makes this Warriors team even scarier. So I think that if they can get a big win against Latrobe, that is what I think is going to really, I don't want to say solidify things for them, but that's going to really kind of give them a feeling of, okay, we've taken now 3 in a row. We're starting to play really well at this time of year. Let's finish it out against Kiski area. And I think if they finish the year with a win against Kiski area and Latrobe, finish the regular season with a 4-game winning streak, they might be one of the teams to really pay close attention to moving into the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's sort of how they finished up last year after they really struggled early in section play. Went on a little bit of a heater on the back end, winning 4 of their final 5. Evan Gross, a guy who stepped up big time against McKeesport. He was just raining in the threes in that much-needed victory. Greensburg Central Catholic girls continue their strong play. They're not just making a late-season surge. They've been good from start to finish this year, including a victory over Sarah Catholic this past week to clinch the section title. I don't know that it's necessarily a surprise that the Centurions are where they are. We knew they were really good coming into the season, but they've kind of overcome some adversity as well. Remember, Maya Morgan missed a lot of time. They're beating really, really good teams. I know they had a disappointing show against McKeesport up in Seton Hill, but they certainly were able to rebound. Much like Penn Trafford, you come up short in a big time showdown, but it shows what you're made of when you can bounce back with some wins. They did that most notably against the Eagles.
Well, you bring up the McKeesport game. I mean, they went up against other teams like Oakland Catholic, North Catholic, Cannon McMillan. They finished the season with Peters Township, who for 6A, I mean, they're right there with Norwin. So I think that this GCC team, they have set themselves up really, really nicely for a deep run because they're getting themselves accustomed to playing top tier talent. And I made a little kind of connection between GCC and Norwin, where both girls basketball teams are kind of comparable in the sense of had kind of heartbreaking finishes last year in the PIAA quarter or semifinals. And then they come back this year. They pretty much return just about everybody from the year before, 20-plus win team from a year ago, and they're just cruising through everybody. So I think that GCC, again, when you've got Erica Gribble, Maya Morgan, and Avery Davis, and that kind of trifecta, we just talked about Penn Trafford having one go-to player. Well, try having three go-to players and figuring out who you're going to stop on a nightly basis, not to mention Kara Dupilka, also a key player in that backcourt that adds a little bit of extra help in the point guard position. So I think that GCC, they are in a great position to make a deep run. Their big thing is just staying healthy. I know you mentioned the injuries that they've had throughout the year, so you don't want that creeping up, but just finish out the season strong. And I think that no matter the outcome against Peters, that's going to be a really great test for them, kind of a final send-off of the regular season to say, hey, where are we right now at the end of the regular season, right before playoffs, and what do we need to work on? Because we're going to go up against teams that could be very comparable to a Peters Township.
Well, you mentioned the comparison to Norwin. I think it's ironic because GCC has several girls who grew up in the Norwin School District before ultimately deciding to go to Greensburg Central Catholic and play for the Centurions. Also, with the injury to Morgan, I think in some senses that could be a blessing in the long term because yeah, they didn't want to be without her for a couple of weeks, but it allowed other players, not just Gribble and Avery Davis, to kind of take on larger roles. And you sometimes benefit when other players get thrust into that. Well, when they go back to their regular roles, now they're a little bit more capable of providing some offense or filling a certain role. So I think that has helped them. And again, they are playing some really good basketball, clinching the section, just one of the goals that they've already accomplished. Certainly they have more that they want to achieve on the horizon. Well, not just clinching section, but clinching playoff spots. We'll look at the boys and the girls teams in Westmoreland County who are already in. We'll begin with the boys. And it's a pretty good selection of teams that have already qualified. Franklin Regional in Class 5A out of that competitive Section 3. Bell Vernon area is also in. Gary area and Burrell compete in the same section. They are in. The Yough Cougars, who are our team of the week, we'll get to them a little bit more detailed later. Mount Pleasant area, Greensburg Central Catholic, Jeanette, and Monessen. Those are some really good teams. And I think, truthfully, the last few years in Westmoreland County, we didn't necessarily have a team or a couple teams that we really thought had a good chance to make it and win a championship. I think this year there might be some teams in there. And Franklin Regional, certainly for me, is one of those teams. We've already seen Bell Vernon beat undefeated Uniontown. So the Leopards, if they're playing their best, they can compete with anyone. And I truly believe that, to some extent, Burrell and certainly Yough are teams that can make a run. And then GCC, I think you could argue, might be the favorite in 2A. So it's a really, really good group of boys teams already in the playoffs. A few more will likely get in, especially out of Section 3 and 5A. But so far, it's a pretty formidable group, I would say.
Yeah, I think that there's been some really, really great competition in Westmoreland County and just some great basketball all season long, really. You mentioned Franklin Regional, and then, GCC, I think that they're, like you said, the clear favorites right now, just the way that they're playing. They're going to be a really fun team to watch in the playoffs. And then Gary area, they're kind of, I don't know what it is about the Trojans, but they kind of give me this under the radar feel that they could spark some sort of run. They have a lot of veteran experience. They've got great leadership. They've got leadership in really important roles like the point guard position, which is always important to have. So when you carry some of that experience with you in those positions going into the playoffs, they know how to handle the basketball in tight situations, down the wire type of games. So I would not count out Dairy area. They're a team that could, in my opinion, right now, maybe be a dark horse in the playoffs and could make a lot of noise. And then Franklin Regional, I think that if they can carry out the rest of the regular season on the high note that they've been able to do, I mean, they could really march through, the playoffs. And again, I think that the one team that maybe could give them some problems and has been their kryptonite is Gateway. But with them having a game against Gateway coming up, they have a chance to redeem themselves. And I think that very similar to GCC girls against Peters Township to end the season, as Franklin Regional winds up their season against Gateway, or at least gets towards the end of the year in that respect, that's a big test right there too. Can we get over this hump? I think that is the final checkpoint for Franklin Regional in this, is can they get over Gateway and get over that hump and get to the playoffs with, hey, we finally got a win over the Gators, something that has bothered us over the years. But I think that this is going to be a very competitive field for Westmoreland County basketball in the playoffs. And we'll talk a lot about Yough in a little bit, but that's a team that is riding at an all-time high right now.
Yeah, so 9 boys teams already in. We're guaranteed to get a few more, at least out of 5A Section 3. At least 2 of the 3 of Penn Trafford, Kiski area, and Greater Latrobe will be in. Southmoreland has a chance to get in as well. So 9's going to grow to double digits, certainly, by the time this week wraps up. There's also 9 teams on the girls' side who have already clinched, including Norwin in Class 6A, Penn Trafford in 5A, Greensburg, Salem, Bell Vernon area, Burrell, Mount Pleasant, Greensburg Central Catholic, Monessen, and Jeanette. And so I kind of look at the same thing here. You mentioned the 2 teams that made it to the state semis last year, Norwin and Greensburg Central Catholic, battle tested, and you figure they're well poised to maybe take the next step, whether that be a WPIAL title or maybe make it all the way to the state championship game. Those are the 2 teams that really stand out to me. I know the Burrell girls are having a really nice year as well, but 9 teams already in. Couple more still in contention. I think Greater Latrobe is one of those teams, as is Franklin Regional, still battling. So we're likely to get to double digits on the girls' side as well.
I think what impresses me so much about the girl basketball clincher, Sean, is that it's pretty much identical schools for the boy clinchers, right? I mean, you've got Mount Pleasant, you've got Burrell, GCC, Jeanette, Monessen. Both boys and girls teams are making the playoffs. And it's great to see that these schools are prioritizing boys and girls basketball, and that it's at a competitive level for both, right? And so you get to kind of enjoy that and get to see that for both sides of the game. So I think that's what's really kind of a telling thing in that, is that there's so many boys and girls teams from the same schools making the playoffs this year. But to your point about Norwin, I mean, we've talked about them all year long. Seeing them recently against Hempfield area was not the cleanest game that they had, but they still found a way.
It was a bloody game, if I would say so myself, Jack.
It was very bloody. You could definitely ask Bailey Snowberger all about that one. But I think that what was so incredible about that win was that even when they were not playing well, I mean, they really just were not clicking, they still found a way to win and win by double digits. So when you have a team that doesn't play even their best basketball and they're still winning by that wide margin, they're that dangerous. So I think Norwin, GCC, those are 2 teams that could go very, very deep. And then Penn Trafford, I think what's going to be so interesting about them is how they kind of overcome some of the injuries that have at times this year hurt them, right? I mean, you have Tori DeStefano that is out, so she's going to be a big contributor that is not in the lineup. How can Penn Trafford kind of manage that? And to the point about GCC girls having some players step up early in the year, Penn Trafford, that's kind of the same thing for them. They've got some opportunities to see some players rise to the occasion.
And finally, our last story of our starting 5, our biggest takeaways from this past week. Another milestone, which feels like every show we've been talking about 1,000-point score. Most recently, Nate Papuga of Dairy area got to 1,000. He did so against Apollo Ridge. I know you've had a chance to see him play a little bit. Talk to Coach Esposito. He just raves about Papuga. It's an impressive accomplishment. And again, I think Dairy area as a whole, with Papuga leading the way, is a team that really can do some damage. And in particular, he can go off for 30 points in a given night and kind of take a game over offensively by himself. So congrats to him. It's a big accomplishment. And I think there's still more to come for he and for his team this season.
Without a doubt. And what's so impressive about him is that he's got amnesia and the good kind of amnesia for a scorer, because if you don't make 2 or 3 in a row, a lot of players will kind of throw in the white towel and say, okay, enough is enough. I'm trying something else. he'll continue to shoot. He'll continue to attack the basket, and I think that's what I love so much about Nate Papuga's game is that he's relentless. Even if it's not his night, he's still going to find a way to score, and he can score on all three levels. He can score from beyond the arc, inside the perimeter, inside the paint. He's got great size. He knows how to use his body well. So he's going to be a player that could really do a lot of damage in the playoffs, and I think that for Derry area, they're going to, really kind of hope that he can carry them through. But then the other personnel, Brady Angus, John Wozniak, other guys that can add a little bit also to the mix. I think that they're going to be nice kind of complementary role players to play off of him. And I think that's what makes Derry areas so unique is that they're very, very spread out and very well balanced in the personnel that they have.
That'll do it for our starting five, our biggest takeaways from this past week. We'll quickly move into our plays of the week. We got 4 plays to get to. We'll begin with the Penn Trafford boys. The Warriors scored a comeback win against McKeesport area at home on Friday, and after they sealed the outcome late, they were able to give a special senior send-off to Jason Sable. Out of action recently with an injury, Sable was inserted in the final moments, and then he put an exclamation point on the win with myself and Roger Downs on the call.
Floater off. Temple comes down with it, throws it ahead to Sable. Sable wants to go and spell, and he scores! For a player who's not nearly 100%, that's pretty darn impressive. And that will do it. What a fitting ending for Jason Sable and for Penn Trafford here on senior night, 57-44, knocking off McKeesport.
A really cool moment for Jason Sable. Jack, I know we saw something similar, a little bit different, but similar with Kendall Williams for the night. She's not back at 100%. Both players hopefully will be able to play at some point in the postseason if the Warriors boys make it there. But really cool moment for a senior send-off for Jason Sable. We'll continue plays of the week with Greensburg Central Catholic and the Centurions clinched the section crown this past week, referring to the boys of Greensburg Central Catholic. That is, since both teams clinched. And highlighting the impressive home win against rival Jeanette, it was a play in the fourth quarter that epitomized their potent offense. As precision passing set up Tyree Turner for the finish, with myself and Greg Bizignani providing the commentary.
Instead, he gets to a closer shot. Can't hit the jumper. Turner has the board. Throws it ahead. Look at the ball movement. They get it to Turner. And he goes off of glass. Terrific offensive execution. Turner's in double digits, and the lead's at 21.
Yeah, the unselfishness and sharing the ball and making 4 passes like that, that's when you have the talent to finish, that's going to be a tough team to stop.
Good stuff there from the Centurions, and of course, only fitting that Tyree Turner puts the finishing touches on it. We'll continue plays of the week with the Hempfield area boys, and although the Spartans faced a defeat against first place Mount Lebanon last week, Hempfield's Drew Gordon provided a highlight reel play to end the first half, hitting a buzzer beater to send his team into the locker room with some momentum, with Dan Flickinger and Roger Downs detailing the sequence.
Gets it in. Sheely open for 3, and it's an air ball. Woodley bounce it off to Gordon, and the long floater, he banks it home. How about that? The Blue Devils playing for the final shot. Gordon with a long floater. It's off the square and in.
I have to say, Sean, I jumped into the broadcast for this one late, and I was hearing Dan talk about some shot. Didn't know what he was talking about. I looked back. Now I know exactly what he was talking about. Incredible shot by Drew Gordon.
Yeah, that's not how you typically hit a buzzer beater either, right? You're throwing it up usually with a heave. That was like a very long floater as he went off the glass with it. Very, very impressive. Unfortunately, it didn't win the game for the Spartans, but it does get them a spot in Plays of the Week. We're going to double up with Hempfield area as we conclude Plays of the Week with the Hempfield area girls, and they won their first section game last Monday against Seneca Valley. And again, it was a buzzer beater. This time it was Ashley Hosnai. That was perhaps the defining moment with myself and Mark Tatarski setting the scene.
That doesn't work, and the Spartans do come down with it. They're going to have to heave it here, and that shot will not count, or will it? It will count! And they're not arguing on the Seneca Valley bench. Goodness, that could be a game changer. We head to the fourth. It's good.
I will say, Jack, I thought that was after the buzzer as I was there in person. I believe our cameraman, Matt Palumbo, thought it was after the buzzer. But you know who didn't think that? The officials. So it counts, and that was much needed. We talked to the Spartans afterwards, and they said that might have been the moment where they realized this was going to be their night. So congrats to them. Congrats for their first section victory, and for their head coach, Bob Madison, who gets his first section victory guiding Enfield area. Well, it's a quick pace show, so we're quickly going to move on to our team of the week. We mentioned at the onset, it's the Yough Cougars boys, and they are absolutely rolling, Jack. Winners of 8 straight, including a massive win against Washington in a first-place showdown. They now are 15-4 overall, tied with the Little Prexies at 8-1 in section play. We could have probably picked them a week ago. We decided to hold off, and man, they rewarded us with maybe their biggest win of the season against Washington. Everyone talks about Tara Crosby, rightfully so. He might get to 2,000 points, but as good as he is, it's really been a group effort this season for the Cougars to kind of turn the corner and take their game to a higher level.
Yeah, you look at players like Xander Aird, and I know that Aird is a tremendous athlete, also plays baseball at Yough, so somebody that is kind of seen as that floor general, if you will. And you know, let's face it, Sean, I think every scorer needs a point guard or a guard that can get them the ball. And I think that Xander Aird is that to Tara Crosby, somebody that, because being a scorer like that, you don't want to have to also set the offense up. That's just a lot of energy that you're exerting. So when you've got somebody that can take that out of your hands and then can just give you the ball, and all you have to do is worry about putting it in the hoop, it makes your life a whole lot easier, and it makes everything work a lot easier for the team as well. And Coach Jim Nesser's got this team rolling at the perfect time of the season, an 8-game winning streak. The one thing that I think that, you know, maybe Yough should, and Yough faithful should maybe be concerned about, are they starting to peak maybe a little too early before the playoffs? I know that we're getting close to that point, but I've always felt that teams that are carrying a winning streak into the playoffs, you always have that in the back of your mind that you haven't lost in however many days. And now you're kind of starting to clench up a little bit, and that margin of error shrinks down significantly. But with that leadership that they've got, not only with Crosby and Aird, but also Austin Matthews, guys that have been around the block for a couple years now and know what it's like to play in these big moments, I don't think that it's going to derail them by any means, this big winning streak right before the playoffs. But we talked about Tara Crosby all year long. We continue to talk about him. Just the fact that we're able to mention that he can very well reach 2,000 points in a career. I mean, that's incredible. That is unbelievable to think about. As a former basketball player myself, I can tell you, scoring 1,000 is really hard. I don't think I even came close to that in all of the careers I had put together. But then getting to 2,000, I mean, that's just unheard of. So hopefully we get to see Crosby reach that milestone, but just an unbelievable job by this Yough team. And like we mentioned, a big win against Washington. And I think that also gives them a lot of confidence rolling into the playoffs.
Yeah, Austin Matthews, the senior forward, and then sophomore guard Ryan Westerman also deserve some credit for the jobs that they have done this season. The last time the Cougars lost a game, it was back on January 5th at Washington. Now, the good news, obviously, there's a lot of good news when you have an 8-game winning streak, because they won the second matchup against the Prexies. Typically, what we see, assuming both teams, win out their section games, usually the committee will look at that and give a slight benefit to the Cougars because they won the most recent matchup. So when you look at seeding, I don't want to try to speculate where these teams are going to be, but you would figure that the Cougars might get a slightly better seed because they won the more recent. And sometimes the difference between, for instance, a 3 seed and a 4 seed can be massive. And so it is crucial. To your point, it does put some pressure on if they maybe go in with an 11-game winning streak into the postseason, but it really would also give them an easier path theoretically, as it would benefit their seeding quite a bit. And we're to the point of the season now that I think coaches for teams that are comfortably in the playoffs do start to try to see where they might be in terms of seeding. So that'll be big for them. What would you consider a successful season in terms of the postseason run for the Cougars this year, knowing that this is their year to do with Crosby being a senior?
I think at least getting to the semifinals, right? I mean, I think that, especially with the talent that they have on this team, obviously, you get to that quarterfinal game, and then I think that's, the basement level, but you want to be past that, right? And I think obviously, sky's the limit for this team. I think that they can make a run to the championship, but they're probably going to be tested along the way. But I think that at least a finish in the semifinals. That's a big win for this Yough team. And obviously they lose a lot of this experience that will then go off after this year. But I think that for Coach Nesser, he now can use this year as kind of leverage for futures teams and say, hey, this is what we're capable of doing. Proof is in the pudding. This is what we're able to do as a group when everybody's working together. And obviously, I think people will say, well, when you have Tara Crosby, it makes things easier. Sure, but he's going to have to be replaced at some point or another. So the fact that they're still able to win, he can use this as an opportunity to show younger players, hey, this is how we do things at Yough, and this is what we're capable of doing. I think that it sets the Cougars up well for the future. So to answer your question in a long-winded form, I would say at least a semifinals appearance.
Yough still has matchups in section against McGuffey, Charleroi, and a makeup against the Mount Pleasant area Vikings. It's now time for our trivia question. Before we get into this week, let's look at last week's question, and it was, which is the first girls basketball team in Westmoreland County to win a WPIAL title? Maybe a little tidbit you can use on your broadcast of the Panthers, Jack. It was Franklin Regional in 1977, one of the first years a champion was crowned. So the Panthers, you don't think of them as a basketball powerhouse on the girls' side, but they were the first Westmoreland County team to capture district gold. That leads us to this week's question, Jack. Don't spoil it by giving the answer. We want our viewers to chime in with their thoughts on the answer. It is interesting. We are talking about the playoff clinchers. This is on the boys' side. One Westmoreland County team has clinched a playoff spot despite currently having a losing record overall. Which team is it? Again, one Westmoreland County boys team has already secured a playoff spot despite the fact that their overall record is below 500. Which team is it? Feel free to reach out to us, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, Facebook, comment on our YouTube channel, whatever. There's some ways you could call Jack Ridenour, text him.
Write me a letter. I'll take snail mail.
Yeah, write him a letter. Go for it. If you want to chime in, feel free to do so for this week's trivia question. We'll have the answer next week. Lastly, a look ahead. And Jack, this is the big one, the final week of section play for the boys and the girls. And we'll begin with the boys' slate. Tuesday games, Baldwin at Hempfield area. We'll have the broadcast of that. We'll also have Greater Latrobe at Penn Trafford. That is a massive game, as is Franklin Regional at Gateway to determine first place in all likelihood. Derry area at Shadyside Academy, also a notable one. Friday, Ligonier Valley at Derry area on WSN. That's a good rivalry matchup between bordering districts. Hempfield area at Norwin, you talk about rivalry matchups, that fits the bill. Gateway at Greater Latrobe, Penn Trafford at Kiski area, Bell Vernon at Elizabeth Forward, Southmoreland at Albert Gallatin, Valley at Burrell. Some really, really good games on the docket. That applies on the girls' side as well. Tuesday, Greensburg Central Catholic at Clairton. Thursday, Seneca Valley at Norwin. We'll have coverage of that on WSN. Penn Trafford at Greater Latrobe. Mount Pleasant at Apollo Ridge. Winchester Thurston at Greensburg Central Catholic. Franklin Regional at Bell Vernon area. We're also going to have some college games on the docket. Wednesday, you and I will team up, Jack, for Cal U at Seton Hill, a women's men's doubleheader. And on Saturday, Clairton heads to Greensburg to play the Griffins. That also a women's men's doubleheader. Both those games will be on WSN. Quick thought on the week upcoming with these games.
Greater Latrobe, Penn Trafford boys basketball game Tuesday. That's got circling that on the calendar, circling that big game right there. And then Gateway and Greater Latrobe on Friday. I mean, again, nothing is, in my opinion, fully decided in that section until, the clock strikes midnight on Saturday morning after all the games are done Friday. So those two games really jump off the page for me because I think that is the most jumbled mess, an exciting jumbled mess, and we'll figure it all out this weekend.
You talk about Greater Latrobe and PT. On the girls' side, that might determine if the Wildcats get into the playoffs. We know Penn Trafford is in. Greater Latrobe still has some work to do, so that also could be crucial. That wouldn't be the first time that they play late in the regular season to determine a playoff spot. That's going to do it for this edition of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast. Again, check us out each and every day on the website, westmorelandsports.com, live game broadcasts, which are also archived. We have great content. We have our Westmoreland alum Q&A. We have the notebook. We have the Recruiting Thursday. We have nightly game recaps. We've got a lot of great stuff on there, not just basketball, but all of the sports that we cover year round. And of course, each and every week, check out our current episode and the past episodes on our YouTube channel. of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast. But for now, we'll put a bow on this one for the final time in section play. We'll be back next week to look at the playoff field right here on the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.